Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Good evening, lentils. I nearly called you lentils and gentlemen for a second there. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Not lentils. If anyone is actually a lentil in the audience, though, do feel free to let me know, because that would be a first. So, we've got a mixed bag, a plethora of topics to sink our fangs into on this eve, on this 2D6 Friday. I believe it's episode 15. So, I'm not going to waste too much time here because we have got a lot to cover. I'm going to look at the fabled active users list first of all and see who we've got in there. We have, let's see, we've got Devil Doll 727. Devil Doll, by the way, is a classic film. Dino Titan Edition, Mickey Genver, Auric Love God, The Soul Assassin, The Wargamer Viking, Fake Near, and who was in there earlier chatting away? Sam Snowden Garcia, and I don't know if I already mentioned The Soul Assassin, but yep, I imagine it's going to be a packed house as always in the evening tonight. Mickey Genver confirms that there are no lentils watching because Newbie isn't here at the moment. So that could be why Newbie never shows his face anywhere and never gives away any personal information. If he is in fact a kind of lentil construct, that is entirely possible. There's Andrew Wade and Thomas. Just Thomas. Okay, folks, so to delve into tonight, there are some new Deadzone things to look at that are very, very juicy. Then, for all you Harambe fanatics out there who are obsessed with deceased gorillas, you're going to have your fill tonight, because as a wargamer, if you really want to channel the spirit of Harambe into your tabletop games, then there is now a way you can do that. And I'm going to show you exactly how after we look at some Deadzone stuff. And then after that, I'm going to be looking at my Kings of War list for tomorrow's tournament, my Undead, which has been tweaked since the last tournament, and people want to hear all about that. And also I've got a sneaky look at my opponent's list as well for round 1, so that's going to be exciting. And then we've got various other juicy new releases to look at from a variety of companies. So, without wasting any further time, let's leap straight onto Deadzone, shall we? Because, wrap your eyeballs around this. As you know, I do play the Plague in Deadzone, and I've been waiting for this moment for them to pop up on the website, re-releasing them all. Oh, we've got a comment there regarding my hair. Yes, I have had a haircut, which was done for charity, of course. And if anyone's interested in donating, in fact, I'll drop a link in the chat right now to the good cause. Let's just see if I can find it here. Putting it into the chat right now. There we go. So if anyone wants to donate money there, who happens to be watching this live, you can do so. So let's talk about the Plague for Deadzone, shall we? So I had pretty much, well, let's look at this Plague faction starter and see how much of this I have. So I've got 3 of those stage 2s. I've got the stage 1. I've got a lot of old stage 3s. These are all nice new hard plastic, ultra juicy ones though. And I've got a couple of dogs, but these are the new dogs as well. And I don't have any plague zombies. So, while this particular kit here, this particular box might not be of the greatest interest to me because it has some things I already own in there, they are very tasty though. Look at these new stage 3s. Very, very juicy indeed. Mortar and the zombies, I'm looking forward to getting some of them. But the box I'm most interested in is the faction booster, because this contains a lot of the things that I don't have, such as the aberration, which I did borrow from somebody to use in a tournament, and it is quite tasty, quite dishlicious, if you will. Also the Plague Teraton, which is something I've wanted to get because it can teleport around the place, and I found that the Plague occasionally suffer from lack of mobility for their really big gribbly things. The new dogs, one of them in there, which would take me up to 3 dogs, which I think is enough. And what else is in here? 3 plastic 3rd gen troopers with mortar, and 5 regular troopers, and 5 zombies as well. Now, I don't have any zombies, and I'm not sure whether 5 would necessarily be enough, but it would definitely be a start. All that stuff there, and of course there's that thing as well, that Plague Swarm, I think it's called. Let's see, is it listed here? Can't see it there, but it's in the picture, so I'm going to assume that it's part of the package. The Plague Swarm there, which is quite tasty. I haven't looked too extensively at that in the rules, just because I haven't had access to buy one. And he's got quite a tasty little hat on there, hasn't he? I think he is in the Deadzone rulebook listed as the kind of regular commander that the Plague have when they don't want to use one of the big Gribblies as a boss. Also, some other new stuff here. Let's look at Nexus Psi, or Nexus Psi, if you wish, expansion. So this not only contains some Plague stuff and some terrain, but it's also got a rulebook which allows solo play of Deadzone, I believe. Let's see, that might not be in this one, that might be in one of the other packs, actually. Okay, that solo play thing is actually in Artificial Stupidity, which contains the Nexus Psi and also a lot more zombies, and probably another book for solo play. You probably need a lot of zombies for solo play, I imagine. That seems to be logical. Also the new sculpt of Dr. Simmons, which I might prefer the old one actually, but I've already got the old one, so it doesn't really matter. And apparently she's got some new rules, which a little birdie has told me are quite tasty, actually. One issue I have with the Plague at the moment is that the stage 1, the big gribbly, ultra-violent, ultra-slow beastie that I'd like to take as my leader, doesn't have a very good splat ability. It's okay, but it's random. So there's a very good chance that whichever ability you bestow on one of your troops is going to be completely useless. However, I've heard on the grapevine that this particular miniature here will give you access to another table which you can distribute abilities from onto your miniatures, but you don't have to roll on it. Apparently you can just choose one. That's what I'm hearing, with abilities such as additional armor piercing and additional speed, which would be very, very interesting. So I'm looking forward to that and looking at that in greater detail. Let's see what else. Also, some of them available separately, like the Aberration, £12.49, quite reasonable. That is quite a big chunk. You can't really tell how big it is until you see it next to other models, but it is a mammoth miniature. Very large indeed. And let's see, anything else we want to look at here? Well, the Fall of Nexus Psi, which is a huge bundle deal, which comes with the 2-player starter set, the Nexus Psi expansion, and the Plague faction starter. So with all that stuff, yeah, you're all fully set for some sweet, sweet Plague action then, aren't you? Also a good start if you're looking into getting into Warpath as well, some of this stuff, because you get a lot more miniatures now. For example, the Plague faction starter. It's more than a starter as far as I'm concerned, just for Deadzone. But when it comes to Warpath, you'd probably need that many to start with. That would just be a small force for that game. Let's see. Dino Titan Edition is a big fan of the Deadzone zombies. Yes, they are very, very tasty. He also says if it's a single-player mission with zombies, it's probably from the Dread rulebook. I have no idea what you're talking about. Let's see. Anybody else? Sam Snowden Garcia says, I need the Dr. Simmons model and paint it in rainbow colours. Because I know a Dr. Simmons who is famous for wearing a horrendous rainbow pattern knit hoodie. Well, you certainly do need to do that then, don't you? Anyone else? Mickey Jenver thinks I'm very shiny, apparently. Is that right? Yeah, that must be because of the lack of hair, although I don't think it's too shiny at the moment. I think it's growing back nicely already. Oric Lovegod, did you buy into the Walking Dead Kickstarter? No, I did not. I've got quite enough games to be getting on with at the moment. So I don't think I'm going to be going in for too many Kickstarters at all. Anything else we want to look at here? I don't think so. So you might think that's going to be the end of the Deadzone chat, but you'd be wrong, because we're going to have a quick look over some images of a game I played the other day. And you can see a pair of shoes under the table there. Very nice indeed. And we're playing the scenario, but the whole point is to, well, I say the whole point, but it's not actually worth that much, to get your troops to the other side of the table and essentially escape from the opponent's deployment area and leave the table, which gets you an amount of victory points that that model would be worth if it died to your opponent. So it's not really that feasible to just sprint everything you've got off the table and win, because you don't get that many points for it. Like my entire force, I think I would have to get almost every model off the table for me to win the scenario, which isn't that easy. You can see I've got some nice spread out deployment here. One little doggy over there. The reason he's on that side is because there was a piece of line of sight blocking terrain there, and the other dog is actually taller, like begging for a treat, so it would have been shot from anyone standing up over there. So modelling for advantage right there. You can see that I was against the Forge Fathers here, and they were all just hiding in the corner. So you might think, well, I could have just sprinted all my stuff down the left-hand side of the table and escaped, but again, that probably wouldn't have been enough. If he'd killed just a couple of models on my way there, then I would have been kind of stuck. Oh, you can see a hair that's fallen onto the table there. Surely not one of mine, since I've just had a haircut, unless it's been there for quite a few days. You can see I've started the advance here. One thing I might do a little too often with my Plague is get them in shooting positions and then fire from quite far away. Have very little chance of success because it's Plague shooting after all, and then they're kind of sitting ducks in the open to be shot back at. Even if they have a little bit of cover, they just die regardless. So maybe I need to just keep them hidden until they're closer. Apart from the HMG, which I think is coming up in the next picture here. There he is, looking out the window. And he actually suppresses entire cubes, so, and you don't even have to hit anything to do that. So he's very, very good. And I actually suppressed that, I think it was this top cube here, one of them. But I managed to suppress several models with him throughout the game. And I did a lot of wounding, not outright kills, but I wounded a lot of models right at the start of the game. And he's pretty much camped in the corner here. I sent quite a bit of stuff down the left, but Mr. Big Gribbly Stage 1 is going right smack down the middle towards the enemy, because I'm not even too concerned about him being shot at, because he's such a tough beast. And if you have him, try and angle him in cubes so that no one will have a clear shot at him, like he's got his elbow right behind that bit of pipe sticking out there. Because that's really the only way anyone's going to damage him, if they have an absolute clear shot at him. And you can see there the HMG, which managed to get onto the top floor of this building. And then, because it's not a heavy weapon, even though it's called a heavy machine gun, it's not technically heavy. So you can jump up a level and then still gun people down. And you can see someone got wounded over there. And this guy, he was just hiding. Because I found that these stage 2s, they're not ideal against Forge Fathers. Because, yeah, they all have lots of armor piercing on their weapons, and the stage 2s only have armor 1. So it's essentially pointless against Forge Fathers, because all their weapons have armor piercing, I think, apart from the really cheap Brocker guys. So, yeah, it's kind of a tricky one to decide what to do with them. So they mostly just hide against the Forge Fathers. And look, you can see that I've been putting wounds on people. I think that's his wound that he hasn't taken with him yet. He's wounded. He's down. I couldn't kill people, though, and wounding them is only useful if you actually get into close combat with them, because then you're going to get an extra dice. But if you're just shooting them, then they're not too concerned by being wounded. He's closing in. You can see how close it's getting, because the enemy little base there, that piece there is right there, so he's very close to it now. And with the command dice, if I get a movement side on the dice, then I'm going to be able to jump him right up there in one go. But I wasn't getting a lot of movement dice, actually, in this game, which was quite annoying. Oh, gone too far there. And up here, I really wanted to get this guy jumping up there and chewing on his face, but I think he was able to kill it in one shot, which happens to a lot of my models, actually, with the Plague. Even these guys, like I said, against the Forge Fathers, their armor's useless, so they just tend to go down instantly so far. And more wounds there. You can see his boss is wounded, actually. I'd got a really good roll to wound him. And here's a nice action shot with just a random stage 3 that I've perched up there, shooting across, getting on the same level as them, so when they shoot back, they're not going to get extra dice. And yes, finally, he gets into combat. The big guy. He just rips someone in half. His other guys run away. But at this point, I've been losing so many models per turn that he just has to survive and kill this model down here. He doesn't have to even touch this big guy, who can only move 1, at most 2 spaces with an extra dice per turn. So there's no way I can actually catch any of his guys if he just runs away, unfortunately. Especially because he's been going first in every single round, because he had less models than me at the start. So he finishes first, so he goes first, and then he also got like 2 or 3 extra activation dice per turn. So he was able to activate most of his army before I'd even done anything. So that was really, really bad news. So this wasn't going to end well, because all he has to do is kill that guy who's already heavily wounded and then escape with one of his dudes off the table, and then he'll just win. And you can see he does actually make it. Wow. I think had I gone first at some point, then I would have been able to catch him. But even then, though, he still had this guy left on the other side of the table, so he could have just escaped. So yeah, it was never going to go in my favor, unfortunately. Lost too many troops on the way over. Maybe I need to get even more obscuring terrain so people can't see anything when I'm advancing up. Or I need to hurry up and make some kind of trench board so I can just walk up completely unmolested and then get into the enemy and do some serious shredding. So, the Plague, I've actually painted a grenade launcher guy, and I was looking at the rules for that, and it is quite tasty actually. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun to use. Not on this guy, because he's got a roof above his head, which is one of the things that is a hindrance for the grenade launcher. You need to be shooting at people that are out in the open on the top floor. But it's another one of those weapons, like the HMG, even if it doesn't actually damage anybody, then it can still really annoy them, because it can blow them out of the cube. So if they're entrenched in a little position, especially high up, and you can knock them over the edge, then that's very, very scary for them, I imagine. So I'm looking forward to getting that in there, and I don't even need to give it line of sight, so it won't necessarily be gunned down in return. So very much looking forward to using that in a game. And as far as those new releases, I'm looking forward to adding an Aberration and a Plague Teraton and some zombies, and maybe a Plague Strider as well, because they've just re-released those. So I think that's going to be quite juicy. Dishlicious, if you will. Okay, so moving on to the next thing here, we're going to look at some Harambe action now. We have the Knights of Nar, or the Knights of Gunnar, if you will, a Wasteman miniature range. This is a Kickstarter which I'm led to believe is launching tomorrow. So there is a link in the description, which you can check out then. And the reason this is extra tasty is not only does it have some nice miniatures, but it also immortalizes Harambe the Valiant. £8. Look at that. What an accurate depiction it is. And I think it captures the spirit and kind of the noble, heroic figure of Harambe, friend to children worldwide, quite well. And of course, that's not the only miniature. You can get all of these, £23 for those 5. Like this one there, with his tentacles wrapped around that weapon of his. And that one seems to have 3 arms, maybe a 4th, if we could see it from another angle, but it looks like 3. And I like this guy as well, leaning on his large axe slash, it's kind of a halberd, I suppose. It actually, that pose reminds me of, you know, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, when the guard is kind of leaning on his weapon, and one of them's eating an apple before Lancelot charges and storms the castle. That's what it reminds me of a little bit. Just needed to have an apple in his hand, I think. And mounted on Death Cargo, which is a great name for those battle snails. Look at all those teeth. Very, very juicy. Colossal battle snail as well, which is obviously much larger. Doesn't tell you the size for them, but this is 78mm tall, which is quite considerable. And there's some kind of big fat ogre type there sitting on the back of it. And a war throne, which you can put on the back of the colossal battle snail. And I think there are going to be other attachments to that as well, I'm led to believe. Pugilistic paladins, they haven't been unlocked yet. And a brutant with that arm's a bit small, that arm's large. Yeah, because it's a bit mutated. So of course you're going to use your strong arm to carry the weapon around and use the other one just for a bit of posing. Rocker, which is a tall walking rock, essentially, which hasn't been unlocked yet either. And there's some rules here for using them in Wasteman or what's the other version of it called? I forgot the name of it now. But the kind of underground medieval fantasy type. The Realm of Na. One part that's jumped out to me immediately, there's a place called Haddock. Oh yes, it's Yeoman it's called, that's it. So I'm going to assume that it's usable in there. And Wasteman, I think it's all compatible with each other. As far as I'm aware, if it's not, then too bad. But that's what I currently am under the impression. So it only needs £500 to reach its goal as well when it starts tomorrow. So I think it can certainly do that. I'm sure a lot of people are just going to pledge purely to get Harambe the Valiant for only £8. I'm very tempted, to be honest. I'm sure people could do some excellent work painting that one up. And like I said, immortalizing the noble spirit and giving that mighty gorilla the send-off it truly deserves in life. I'm wondering why no other miniature manufacturers have jumped on this particular meme yet. Maybe it's only a matter of time once this one is a huge success. But I would, of course, encourage everyone in the audience now to back. Even if you're not into Wasteman, at least you've got a back for this beauty, haven't you? You must. Let's see what kind of comments we've got going on here. Bazooka J. Rambo is a big fan of Wasteman, apparently. Excellent. Let's see. Auric Lovegod, shouldn't he be flinging a kid around? Well, I don't think he was actually that rough with the child that he was carrying around, was he? That's a whole different topic, though. Very controversial issue, of course, whether the gorilla would have harmed the child or not, and the fact that they couldn't take the chance. So they decided to gun it down, as it were. Auric Lovegod, if Harambe had been a lion or tiger, nobody would have batted an eye. Yeah, that may be true. We do have a lot more in common with these kind of creatures. With the various apes and monkeys and so on, we can relate to them a bit more than we can with cats and so on. Let's see. Stu Gibson, in the house. Okay, so let's move on from this. As I said, not live yet, but I think it's going live tomorrow morning, so I'm sure people are going to be leaping all over that. Now it's time. Boom. For people who like spreadsheets and numbers and stats, it's time to look at my Kings of War tournament list. 2,000 points. I'm assuming that you all watched my video on the recent Kings of War tournament, and I did quite well, but I don't like to take the same list repeatedly. I like to mix things up a bit, and there are a couple of undead lists I want to try out before I go back to goblins, and this is one of them, featuring 2 zombie legions, which is about the most I could make. I don't think I could stretch to 3 legions with the amount of zombies I have. Maybe with some serious hardcore unit filling, maybe I could throw like a corpse cart on there to fill up some space and get 3 legions, but I think 2 is probably enough. And then I've taken out the 2 skeleton hordes to make space for another legion of zombies and just put in 2 small units of skeletons instead. I've put in some wraiths instead of one of the werewolf units because I just want to try them out. A lot of people seem to take them, so they must be good. I've only played 1 game with them though, so we'll see. There's quite a heavy flying theme in this list, actually. I've kept the Soul Reaver Cavalry. They were in there last time as well. I'm probably going to ditch them for the next tournament I go to with Undead, but I want to give them another go in this one. Vampire Lord flying, same as before. However, the on-foot vampire has been replaced with a vampire on Undead Pegasus, who can also fly, obviously. And I've given him ensorcelled armor, so his defense goes up to 6 instead of the 5 that is reduced to for being on a Pegasus, since people could just stab his beastie instead of him. So, main thinking behind that change is the fact that in the previous tournament I had too many points invested in individuals, and that really came back to bite me on the behind in numerous scenarios because individuals weren't able to score at all in certain scenarios, or they were worth half points in others. So I thought, you know what, I need to drop individual points. So I'll take out one of the individual vampires and put one in on a Pegasus, which has advantages and disadvantages. Disadvantages being that he can't just charge off in any direction he wants. He has to actually be looking in the direction he wants to charge because he's not an individual. But on the other hand, he can multiply his attacks if he gets the inevitable flank and rear charges, which he might do due to being able to fly. So it's quite likely he'll get in those positions. It also means, though, that the enemy could get flank and rear charges on him and get multiples of their attacks. So it could be a bit of a double-edged sword that I'll have to be somewhat careful with him. And of course, he's got this flying vampire buddy to run around with him as well. So I think they're going to be quite a scary combo. Then the two necromancers again. A slight change to their equipment this time. I've taken out one of the surging item and spread out the inspiring talisman and the bane chant between two of them this time. I was thinking about dropping one of the necromancers actually, but because I've still got a lot of units I would like to surge, I'm keeping both of them in for now. Two zombie legions and the wraiths, who would all like a bit of surge action. The wraiths can be very handy with the surging because they have the ability to fly behind the enemy, of course, and then be surged into the rear, which no one likes. And I've got the skeleton units as well, which could benefit from some surging, for some sneaky flank action perhaps. And then a lot of units that aren't reliant on surge, werewolves, soul reavers, the vampires. I don't have a huge amount of units or a huge amount of drops, as people might like to say. So we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping just this huge wad of zombies in the middle. If people are bringing elite armies, especially that have not that many attacks, but really powerful attacks, then they're going to be kind of wasted, just punching mush in the face, essentially. If you look at something like a giant that at most only has 12 attacks, but with a ton of crushing strength 3, they're only defense 3 to begin with, so 2 of that crushing strength is already wasted. And really, they're going to be getting it nowhere near to potential wavering, well, they can't waver, but potential routing status after one round of attacks. And one of these legions is actually the same amount of points as a giant if you ignore the upgrade. And the upgrades, putting an upgrade on that many attacks, I think is totally worth the points. Having a legion hitting on 4s is very, very tasty. And for this one, I've gone for the Brew of Strength because obviously I can't give them both the Brew of Sharpness. And it was a kind of a toss-up. I thought, well, I could give them Blessing of the Gods to make them elite, so they re-roll 1s to hit. But that's not a guarantee. Re-rolling 1s isn't the same as just getting +1 to something. So Brew of Strength, so I'm going to be at least getting +1 to the wound roll, regardless. So that's going to be tasty. Auric Love God, is it Clash of Kings rules? Yes, it is. It's another one of the Clash of Kings warm-up tournaments, which I'm not going to be attending the actual Clash of Kings itself, but I'm all in on these warm-up tournaments. So there's going to be some more competitive lists there again, which I seemed to do quite well against last time. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this list will do. The other list I want to try at some point is, well, there's 2 actually. I want to try the Triple Legion at some point in the future. I also want to try just multiple hordes, like 3 zombie hordes, 2 skeleton hordes, just hordes all over the place, like a complete board-filling army that just fills up the entire board. That would be quite fun, I think. And then another one I want to try is multiple vampires. I think I can squeeze 5 vampires into a list. Probably not 6, but I think 5, and then some cheap other units just to enable me to even take that many vampires. So I think that's going to be good. I don't know how effective it's going to be, because quite a few of them are going to be flying, and of course there are rules that kind of hinder flyers in tournaments, where you can't just fly off once you've taken hits in close combat. So it's going to be fun trying that out, and I'm thinking of putting in one of the named vampires, the Lady Elona, I think she's called, something like that. And I've got kind of a female vampire model I can use for that. So I could take, I think it's 4 or 5 different kinds of vampire I could take in that list. 1 on foot flying, 1 Pegasus, 1 on a dragon, and so on. I think that would be a lot of fun. It would be pretty nuts as well. But the board filling one, I'm kind of more interested in trying that at the moment. I think that would just be pretty crazy. Let's see. Auric Love God, I thought you did much better than I expected. Yes, I did better than anyone expected, I think. Better than I expected, certainly. I think I played it quite well, and I didn't have any horrendous bouts of bad luck in any of the games. I was always just kind of either average or maybe slightly above or below average luck. I didn't have any crazy bad luck. The only things that went against me were kind of rolls for turn 7, where on one occasion I didn't get, or maybe 2 occasions where I didn't get a turn 7, and if I had, I would have won. And another one where I did get a turn 7 where I really didn't want one because I was already in a winning position. So those were the only things that went against me. Everything else was pretty decent luck all the way through. There were not a huge amount of double 1s on either side or double 6s or anything crazy like that. It's going to be fun to see how this one does. Trying out some things. Never tried 2 legions before, apart from in one practice game. Only tried out wraiths in that one game as well. Same for the vampire and Pegasus. And for that, I'm actually going to be using this guy, which is a Reaper Bone Horror, which I think passes quite nicely as a vampire on a Pegasus. It's like a combination of a vampire and a Pegasus. It's got the horrible, gruesome fightiness of a vampire and the wings and size of a Pegasus. Also with a scorpion tail as well, for good measure. And I think it's just a cool model. It is all metal, though, so it's entirely possible that one of the wings will fall off during the game because it's a very, very tiny connection point. I would like to see Reaper release this in some other material. I'm not sure about how well it would do in bones, actually, because it's quite thin all over, so it would be very bendy. So I don't think it would be that suitable for bones, to be honest with you. They would probably have to repose it if they were going to make it in bones. Okay, now I'm going to have a look at the list I'm going to be facing in Game 1, actually, at the tournament. And it's going to be the pillage scenario, which is where there are various objectives scattered around. And you can't pick them up, you just have to be on them at the end of the game. So, how do I match up against this? Well, there's a horde of revenants in there, who happen to be elite with the blessing of the gods. So they hit on 4s and they'll be re-rolling 1s to hit. And they have, if we just compare them to a zombie legion, they have less attacks, way less attacks, slightly lower nerve, but way higher defense. So, also with the way my legion is, of course, with the Brew of Sharpness, they will also be hitting on 4s. So it's going to be a decent matchup because they're very comparable points-wise if they end up fighting one of my legions. I would fancy my legion's chances if I get a little bit of backup in there, especially if I could get Bane Chant off on them. I think that would be a good fight, certainly. Zombie legions are going to absorb a lot of punishment. They are going to take damage, though. Let's see, Auric Lovegod, you know you are going to want to go to Clash of Kings after all these practice games, and that you're doing better than expected. Yes, but unfortunately, someone decided that Clash of Kings needed to be on a weekend that I'm otherwise occupied. They should really consult me before organising these events, shouldn't they? Wraiths, 2 units of Wraiths to my 1. One of them with Fire Oil, which doesn't affect me because it just gives them extra crushing strength against regeneration. I don't have any regenerating units, but I'm sure it'll serve him well against other opponents there. So the Wraiths, I'm not overly scared by them because I think I've got enough to counter flyers. I've got my own Wraiths, I've got the 2 flying vampires, so I'm not overly concerned. Zombie Trolls. I might be concerned by them. There are 2 units of them. So, if I were to put my skeletons into them, the skeletons would get eaten alive, I'm pretty sure. And my Soul Reaver Cavalry wouldn't like to take hits from these trolls. I would have to get rid of them in one go, really. And I think the Soul Reaver Cavalry could probably accomplish that. So, yeah, but they are, them added together, are around the same price as the Soul Reaver Cavalry with the upgrade, though. So they're not too much more expensive. So killing one of them and then leaving yourself vulnerable in enemy lines isn't really enough. So that's where I would have to use my vampires to occupy other units. Werewolves, he's got a horde, and I've only got a regiment, so he's got much more potency in his werewolf unit than I have. He's got the Brew of Strength on them as well, which is quite a good upgrade, I think, for werewolves, since they only have the Crushing Strength 1. And there aren't many units where 1 is going to be... Well, there aren't many units where 2 is going to be an overkill. I mean, the zombie legions are one of those units, though. So I'm sure he won't want to waste werewolves fighting the zombie legion when he's paid for the Brew of Strength. Revenant Cavalry. Now, this is a sneaky, annoying little unit here because they've got the Brew of Haste on them, putting them up to speed 9. So that's quite a decent threat range on that tiny little unit of Revenant Cavalry there. And they're quite inexpensive as well. So that's going to be interesting to see how they do. They can at least be annoying to my werewolves, for instance. Revenant King on a horse. Now, this guy has a bit of surge about him. He's the main surge giver in this army, certainly. The two vampires definitely don't want to be wasting their time surging. He's got one vampire lord on a horse, one on a dragon. So he's got less flying vampires than I do, but the one he does have is the beastliest of them all, on a dragon. There's more attacks, higher nerve, higher crushing strength, and a breath attack. So I think that's really his only shooting attack. And I think this is going to be a really interesting matchup. I know for a fact that he's done one practice game against my list, is what I've been told. So maybe that'll give him a slight edge, maybe it won't. And I think that one went to a draw. But I haven't even played with my own list extensively. I've only played one game with it, and it wasn't on the pillage scenario. So we shall see how that goes. I think it's going to be an interesting matchup, though. We've got quite different lists, but with some similarities as well. One vampire and a monster, one non-monster vampire. So there'd be quite an even matchup if all the vampires get into a big brawl. He's, of course, got the Revenant King, whereas I've got Necromancers. He doesn't have any Necromancers, so his surge ability is limited. And the units that he might want to surge, potentially, would be Revenants, Wraiths, Zombie Trolls. So he's got quite a few big, expensive units that could benefit from surge, but he doesn't have a lot of surge-giving power. So I might be able to use that to my advantage. Of course, he is quite maneuverable, though, as well, with his werewolves, the big horde of them, which are more of a worry than my small unit of werewolves, and his wraiths, of course, who can fly, which gives him a lot of options. And I only have the one flying unit of wraiths, but we do have 3 flyers each. So it's looking pretty even, in my opinion. If it got into a straight brawl, I think his units would probably win overall. I think that's how it would go. His vampire and undead dragon is slightly more powerful than my vampire on Pegasus. His revenants, slightly more powerful than a zombie legion. Zombie trolls, slightly more powerful than what I've got. My Soul Reaver cavalry are going to be important. I'll have to use them well and pick which units I'm going to be able to take out with them in one hit, potentially, because I don't want to get stuck in an unfortunate position, because he does have the surge power. Even if I overrun a bit, he does have that little bit of surge that he would need to just turn a unit round and get a flank or rear on them. So I don't want to get left in that position at all. Let's see what the people saying here. Andy, at least it's only a weekend where you're doing something else with me. It's a different country, says Mr. Titan Edition. Yes, I'm sure a lot of people do come over for the Clash of Kings tournament. Auric Lovegod, what did you say the scenario was? It's pillage. So, looking at it purely from the scenario point of view, I've got 2 cheap units in the Skeleton Warriors that, if aren't doing anything else, can sit quite happily on objectives and probably avoid being killed in one hit to last-minute breath attacks with their reasonable nerve. More so than a unit that ghouls could, definitely. That's the problem I have with the ghouls. If I leave them on an objective and someone just casts any kind of shooting attack on them, they just die in one go. But skeletons hopefully won't have that problem. They might, but it's going to be more difficult for him. As far as cheap units, he can just sit on objectives and not worry about. I'm not sure, actually. All his units are relatively expensive. Apart from the Revenant Cavalry, there's the one unit that are quite cheap for him. And the King, the Vampire Lord, would be individuals, so they can't go after objectives. As far as objective hopping towards the end of the game, he's got the Vampire and Undead Dragon, who can just fly about like a lunatic. Werewolves are a handy one for that. And as far as I'm concerned, I've got my small unit of werewolves. Soul Reaver Cavalry are quite maneuverable. They can move at the double, of course, with them not being shambling. And I've got my Vampire on a Pegasus, who can potentially take an objective at the end of the game. We've both got Wraiths as well, who might be handy for that job, although the inability to move at the double can slow them down quite a bit, but it's still 10 inches, not to be sniffed at, definitely. So it's going to be an interesting one, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes, because this guy, I did play him in the last tournament, and he's very, very highly ranked, and I almost beat him. So I think even if I lose game 1, I'm not overly concerned. As long as I can get my 1 win in every tournament, that's what I'm aiming for. And of course, having a good time and trying out some crazy new stuff with this list that I haven't done before. The Double Legion is going to be a lot of fun to try. And the Wraiths. And the Vampire and Undead Pegasus. And then just a couple more lists I want to try before going back to the old Goblins. Speaking of the Goblins, I'm going to drop the old screen share for a second before I go on to some other stuff, because I'm going to show you what I'm painting up for those goblins, actually. Bum, 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 bum. It's another giant. It's a very, very tall lady who is currently very blue. I haven't painted her clothes yet, with a fence in front of her. And for anyone who's already seen this work in progress, you'll see that I've added a horse skull to the fence now. Let's see if it'll get a really nice, high-quality focus action on that. Come on, Mr. Camera, you know you want to. Come on. No, is it not going to do it? It's too busy focusing on me. Anyway. There's a, oh, there you can see the little head dangling off there as well. It's finally focused. You can see the horse skull in glorious detail there. So this is a 60mm base, because both of my other giants are on 60mm, so I thought, even though this model doesn't really need it, it would be silly if my giants were inconsistently based. So I want to have them all on the same size, otherwise it would get silly. Bazooka J Rambo, nice work, Andy. Let's see. Why the fence? She having trouble keeping people out of her garden, says Oracle of God. Yes, she is, quite frankly. She's just trying to grow a turnip patch, and it's constantly being invaded and snowed upon. So the growing isn't going particularly well, actually. Let's see what else I'm working on here. Some Deadzone terrain. We've got a little generator that's almost finished here. Just needs a lot of dry brushing on it and then some rust effects, and then we'll be done with that. And also various other things for Deadzone. Rubble, which is again just needing some dry brushing and rust. Pipes, same thing there. And some bridges, same story for them as well. Lots of dry brushing coming up for them. And this kind of conveyor belt as well, which you can just about see all of it at once. It's quite hefty, this thing. It's going to be fun. Add a bit of character and a little bit of narrative to the Deadzone battlefields. So it looks like there's kind of an operational factory, or it was operational. Oracle of God, your rubble looks clean. Yes, it does look clean right now because it's not all rusty and demolished and dry brushed yet. Mickey Genbo, wow, you are busy. Yes, there's a lot of stuff on this table. There's also, of course, Cecil the Magical Unicorn, which I haven't continued painting yet, but that's going to happen at some point when I have good reason to get that finished. Let's see, anything else that's on the imminent working horizon? Not really, because I just finished my Deadzone Plague guy with a grenade launcher and a Stormcast Eternal. You may have seen pictures of those on Facebook. But they were sitting right there on my painting table. Now they've been put away and replaced with all this Deadzone stuff for now. And after that's finished, what am I going to work on next? Looking around the room, see if there's anything I should be doing. I've got to finish my fortress, actually, and I've bought a black can of spray paint because my airbrush does not like black primer. I've tried all the tricks under the sun that people have given me, and none of them are successful. It's just not going to work. So I need to get the actual spray can out and not spend an hour painting a very small area with the airbrush in black and then having to clean the airbrush for 45 minutes to get it to spray for another few minutes again. It's an absolute nightmare. Let's see. Andy, are you going to join the Star Saga Kickstarter? Well, it's very, very unlikely I'm actually going to back it because I've still got Dungeon Saga on that side of the room over there somewhere, and I haven't actually played it yet because I don't have the right amount of people in close proximity to me to play those kind of games regularly. So I don't think I could really warrant spending the money on it when I haven't played Dungeon Saga yet. But I'll have a look at it, definitely. And maybe it'll interest me. Maybe there'll be some miniatures in there that will grab me firmly by the gonads, and I'll back it just on the basis of getting those, perhaps. Let's see. Dino Titan Edition. By the way, Andy, a unicorn was once a star player for Amazons in Lude Bowl. Was it? I was not aware of that. Oracle of God, you don't have friends? I find that hard to believe. Well, I don't know that many people round in this area, actually. I know a few people who are within striking distance for gaming, but very few of them play the same systems. So it's difficult to kind of get them all to interact and available at the same time because most of them tend to have children as well, and they're available at vastly different times. So like, there's some people that come around to play 40k, some people that come around to play Kings of War, Deadzone. There's a few people I know that play Bolt Action, but I haven't played that for a while. A few people played Drop Zone Commander, not played that for a while either. And I've just set up an Age of Sigmar Manchester Facebook group, so hopefully I should get some people to play that around here as well. Oracle, I've got time to reach out then. Yes, it is, and with that Facebook group I have been reaching out to the local people to try and get more games in. Sam Snowden Goss, yeah, sounds like Dungeon Saga would be a perfect way to bring them together. It probably would in an ideal world, but the time availability doesn't tend to line up very well. Do people come around to steal your fruit, says Mickey Genver. I don't think any fruit has gone missing. She's suggesting that maybe Mr. Remington Steele comes around here to steal fruit. I can't say that I've ever noticed him stealing any fruit from this house. Do you have any evidence you want to back that up with? Anyway, while that's being potentially fabricated, I'm going to start looking at some other stuff in a minute. But Oracle of God says Dungeon Saga Zombicide. Yes, if I could get people available at the same time, I would be playing a lot more of those kind of games, a lot more board games and such. But the way it is at the moment, most of the people that I've managed to have selected for my opponents in this local area are available once every few weeks and only at very specific times because of family and work commitments. So we shall see. Okay, let's have a look at this. So a couple of Mantic related things first of all. On their blog, they had a meet the new Mantic team little article here. So I'm not going to watch them right now, obviously, but a couple of the faces are familiar, and I've seen this guy somewhere before. I think he's been involved with another company, so maybe potentially headhunted. I think he's their new social media guru. Yeah, there he is. Let's see who else is a new face. This guy might be. Stock and build supervisor. I don't think I've seen him anywhere before. And this guy, head of global marketing. Hell yeah. Don't think I've seen him before. So I think definitely Mantic do need to allow the world to connect with the rest of their staff, because really in recent years it's all been about Ronnie, and if it wasn't about him, people weren't interested. But once they get to know the other Mantic staff, then I'm sure they'll learn to love them just as much. Once you pick up all the subtle, little intricate details of their personality and grow to love their quirks, for example. Next, Star Saga. They've got a whole thing here about developing the Star Saga rules and how it differs from Dungeon Saga. This was put up on my birthday, actually, the 19th of September, which was a joyous occasion for all. And I ate lots of cake. So the gist of this is that they weren't satisfied with certain aspects of Dungeon Saga, particularly the kind of advanced rules, and they wanted to put so much stuff in there on request that they felt like some of it was a bit shoehorned. And they're really going to be kind of working, I would say, backwards with Star Saga and making it immediately compatible with all the rules they want to add on later on, rather than starting off with a simple formula and then going crazy with it later. Have the craziness in mind when you're working out the simple parts, I think is what they're doing. They're also changing the combat resolution. The way you fight is moving to be more like Deadzone, I think, which is probably good. I think the way Dungeon Saga fighting works does throw a few people off, and they have to do it quite a lot before they get the hang of it, I've found. So simplifying that is probably a good thing. Cover, which leads me to believe there's going to be maybe slightly more open terrain than in Dungeon Saga, but it remains to be seen. I'm not sure how they're going to go about that. The Overlord is changing into the Nexus, and there's no longer a timer in the deck, which people I know have complained about with Dungeon Saga, so that's interesting. Let's see what else. Apparently it's of course in the Warpath universe, and they've got a beyond the core game bit. It won't have kind of an extra expanded book as such, but it will come with I think there'll be an expansion for that kind of thing, rather than just a big book that comes with the pledges. I'm sure that it's all kind of work in progress though, and they don't know exactly what's going to come with what and what form everything is going to take just yet. If it looks like they're playing a little practice game there, the rooms do look quite small, actually. So I'm not sure how cover would work exactly. That's going to be an interesting one, see how they tackle that, because it's not like it's big 3D terrain going on. So maybe if they're just kind of poking their head around a corner, I don't know if there's something in there that lets you do that. We shall see, I suppose. It's going to be interesting. Now, I've got a slight issue with the Warlord Games newsletter this week. I think this is the first time I've actually seen the Warlord newsletter, and I've got a couple of issues with it. The main one being that, in my mind, that isn't really a newsletter. When I hear newsletter, I want to be able to just scroll down and read about all of these things, and then maybe have to click a link at the end for more information. I don't just want a title and then click on the article, which is what this newsletter is entirely, like a picture of it, and then to actually learn anything about them at all, you have to click the article. I would like a bit more text to be in the newsletter itself, rather than it just being a hub to send you to different places. I know this is the age of technology, and it's probably for mobile-friendly purposes, but it's not ideal for someone like me who does the majority of their internet stuff on the PC. Maybe anyone who's really big into mobile devices and does everything on a tablet or a phone, then maybe you would enjoy a newsletter with this kind of format. Let me know in the comments if you would, if this is something you prefer because of your style of browsing. Also, by the way, here's one for the comments. I meant to bring this up earlier, but I forgot. Special rules in tabletop games for the Harambe the Valiant miniature. Go. The funnier the better. Okay, let's see. Auric Lovegod isn't that interested in another dungeon crawler, fantasy or sci-fi. Interested in Weird World War with Conflict 47. Yeah, the Conflict 47 does seem to have grabbed quite a few people, because originally I thought of Bolt Action as the game that kind of bridged the gap between your 40k type players and your historical gamers, because it's more simple and fast, and 28mm obviously, which is easy to relate to. But this Conflict 47 is even more so a bridge between the sci-fi world and the historical world. So I think the people that didn't even give Bolt Action a try, which I know a lot of people did, but the people that wouldn't even take that plunge because it was just too historical for them, a lot of those people are looking quite seriously at Conflict 47, from what I hear. And the miniatures do look pretty tasty. Can't argue with that. Very, very juicy indeed. I did actually watch the Beasts of War battle report as well. I found that quite interesting. Enlightening. And there weren't that many changes from the Bolt Action rules at all, just a couple of extra ones for the more high-tech stuff. Oh, we've got our first Harambe special rule. Bazooka de Rambo. I shoot first is the rule. Wow. Sam Snowden Garcia says, on the PC I can sort of cope, but still the format should get in the sea. Yes, this style of newsletter, not a fan. Put more text in there, Warlord. We don't just want it to be a click hub. We want an actual newsletter presented like a... We want to be addressed by someone who is writing out the newsletter, like, hello and welcome to the Warlord Games newsletter. I am so-and-so, and here's what's going on this month. Here's this. Here's what you can expect from this video if you were to go and click on it. Teehee, there's a really funny part where this unit does this particular thing. I would like to see a lot more of that, because you don't really have any info like that, other than them saying it's a mighty clash. So I think they've definitely got some room for improvement there. They're another company that I think need to up their social media game, if you will, like Mantic are trying to do at the moment. It's weird how GW kind of lagged behind on embracing the community for all these years, and now some of the things they're doing are actually ahead of everybody else with their live streaming of events and such. So they've kind of jumped ahead of a lot of the other companies in recent weeks. Let's see. Samstone Garcia, presented like a newsletter. Yes, ideally a newsletter should be presented at least somewhat like a newsletter, I would suggest. Okay. Alright, Love God, I'm not a fan of assembling the Warlord plastics. I haven't actually assembled any Warlord plastics. I've only played the Belgians in bolt action, and they're all in metal, apart from some of the vehicles, which are part metal and part resin. So I'm afraid I can't really comment on any of that. I haven't played any of the mainstream armies that would come in plastic. Let's see. Auric Love God. Yeah, but for 12 hours at a time is a bit much. Yeah, streaming an event for 12 hours is a lot. But I was actually a big fan of that coverage, and I think other companies should be doing something similar. I think Mantic streaming live from their open day, and then they cut between like going around interviewing people who are playing demo games and then also having a live stream of the seminars they do. I think a live Mantic Open Day stream would be quite popular. Okay, let's have a look at something else. Gene Stealer Cults. So 40k here, and this is the latest leaked image as far as I can tell. So this is actually something that's very interesting. I don't think I would ever buy them and attempt to paint them, just because, if anything, this might sound weird, but there's too much detail on them for me. Because I've got so many other things to paint, I don't think I could spend the necessary time to make these guys look good. Unless I was being paid money to do it, I don't think I could justify spending that much time on what will probably get killed quite easily. These are probably like your, maybe slightly better than a Chaos Cultist, but probably not too far above that level. So I imagine you would need quite a lot of them. And yeah, I don't think I could justify it. I do like them though, I do think they're very cool. Cooler than the Mechanicum, I think. Gene Stealer Cults. These guys that look very nice as well. These are like the ultimate kind of old school hybrids where it really was part man, part Gene Stealer, but mostly Gene Stealer, you felt, just with a couple of human hands to grip some weapons like a knife, which is always funny that anything that's part Gene Stealer would need knives when they all have at least a couple of claws, I think. I do like them though. Sam Garcia says, yes, there is finally there is such a thing as too much detail. I agree. A lot of the new stuff actually has a level of detail that's quite intimidating to someone like me who doesn't like to spend a vast amount of time painting any particular model. Let's see. Oh, Bazooka Jeremba with another Harambe rule. Steals your bananas so you lose strength, etc. Not sure about that one. Sam Goss here says those are lovely. Yes, these are very, very nice. And if you could possibly get away with not needing that many of them, then there's probably the kind of thing that would tempt me, because it does remind me of those old school models you used to see kind of in the, not even in the White Dwarfs that I bought, because it would have been earlier than that, but if I was like round at a friend's house and they had an ancient copy of White Dwarf that was all beaten up and they'd had it passed down from their great uncle or something, and through that you would see the old miniatures like this. I'm sure there are probably a couple of people in the audience who can remember when the old school Gene Stealer cults were a thing, but certainly not me. Auric Love God, defined vast amount of time. Well, I struggle to paint for longer than an hour at a time, and struggle to do that more than once or twice a day, generally. So I don't paint very fast at all. If I can find a quick and simple way to paint something, then I can kind of plow through it a bit faster. But when it comes to picking out lots of tiny details and using interesting techniques that would do models like this justice, then I don't think I would even attempt it. Because I think painting these in a really basic, bog standard way wouldn't be good enough, because they are so nice. Let's see. Finally, there's been loads of detail on GW models. I remember trying to paint the old Space Wolf Terminator Rune Priest in the 90s, and that was festooned in detail, says Bazooka J. Rambo. Yes, there have been heavily detailed miniatures before, but in terms of the plastics, if you're comparing them to something like a Space Marine, that's very, very easy to do. With just edge highlighting, I could do them very, very quickly. Or looking at more recently, for me, Stormcast Eternals, things like that. I found a way to paint them that's very, very quick, but actually looks quite good. And there isn't a vast amount of fiddly detail on them. It's mainly armor plates. So this stuff would take a lot more planning, I think. I suppose if I was going to paint something like this, I would probably sample some of those new gloss effect washes, because apparently they are amazing at picking out and kind of avoiding shading because they just do it for you. The way washes were supposed to, but the modern washes kind of cloud and discolor rather than fade entirely into the crevices. But apparently the new gloss ones do that job very well. That's what I've heard. That's what seems to be making the rounds. So I might try that if I was to go for some models like this. But I'm definitely not buying anything 40k wise until the new edition comes out, because I want to see exactly what they do with it, whether they completely destroy it, whether certain kinds of armies would be useless now. So it's a game system that I'm avoiding for now, kind of the way I was with Fantasy during the end times, because I just wanted to see where all the pieces were going to fall before I spent significant sums on it. So that's where I am with 40k right now. Bazooka J. Rambo, for the price they charge, they should be high quality and full of detail. Yes, they should be. You are definitely right. And there are people that will appreciate this level of detail. People that are really obsessed with painting to a high level. I do know a lot of people like that. I am certainly not one of them. I do try and improve my painting technique all the time, but not if it means spending more time on the model. I try and find techniques that I can either adapt into a more simple and quick way, or techniques that are going to speed up my painting rather than making it look necessarily better. Because I've got so much that I should be painting, then I don't feel like I can indulge that much time on just a small number of models. I've got a room full, half full of painted models, half full of unpainted models. I've got some Kings of War Undead Revenants, which haven't been touched with a paintbrush. I think I still need to actually drill out their bases and put magnets in them. I've got some Deadzone stuff from the new starter set, which I'm not sure if I'm going to get round to. And some old Deadzone Forge Fathers as well, like these guys, who have only had their bases sanded so far. May do something with them at some point if I want to get into them. Let's see what else I've got. I've got a lot of terrain as well. I've got some Dark Ops laser cut wood terrain. I've got my fortress, which I haven't finished yet, which I need to get round to ASAP. And I've got more Stormcast Eternals, obviously. I've got more Kings of War Goblins floating around the place. What else have I got? I've got a lot of Chaos Space Marines, actually, some of which aren't assembled, and Grot tanks for 40k. But like I said, I'm leaving all that stuff alone for now, because I want to see what's happening with 40k. Oracle of God, it's going to be like AOS. If it's exactly like Age of Sigmar, but tweaked to fit the sci-fi realm, then I'll be very pleased, because I think those rules are perfect, and I think they would very much fit the 40k universe. I know a lot of people would hate it, but if everyone hates it and everyone abandons it, and I just happen to do a live 40k show every week, then I think that would send my subscriber count through the roof, if everyone else is abandoning it, setting fire to their Space Marine armies. Let's see. Sam Garcia, full of paintable, non-bitty detail. Yes. You want detail, but you don't want tiny little insignificant things that you would never notice unless you look really closely. But to a perfectionist painter who feels like they have to pick out every little detail, at least in some way, they can get really annoying. Bazooka J. Rambo, easier and better rules will be good. Yes, that is definitely true for 40k. The rules at the moment, the actual rules aren't that complicated, but it's the treasure hunting that no one likes. Sam Garcia, I feel like the designers can go crazy with what they can do with the CAD program and forget that someone has to paint them. That might be a reasonable point, actually. What's the phrase? You didn't stop to think whether you should, because they were so concerned with whether they could, something like that. GW is about miniatures, not really about rules, says Oracle of God. Yes, but they have been moving in the direction of embracing the gamers lately. So we'll see about that. Now, someone made a comment about bolt action slightly higher up. Oh yes, it was Mr. Titan Edition. Even with sci-fi touch, bolt action won't catch me. For me, it's a little bit too close to real war, even though it's historic. It's the same reason I don't play video games with a real war background. Right. Says also, I am Serbian, I've experienced war, and therefore prefer stronger sci-fi influences. Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. A lot of people who either have real kind of military experience or have witnessed that kind of thing firsthand, I could see why they wouldn't really be into that. Same thing for a lot of entertainment genres don't appeal to certain people because of real life experiences they've had. Let's see. Wasgob, you can tell they're CAD sculpted. They lack soul, in my opinion, with all the CAD era designs. There is definitely a little bit of soul lacking in anything that's designed on a computer. To a degree, there are ways you can kind of hybridize it, as far as I can tell, but not being a sculptor, I couldn't go into a vast amount of detail on that. But if you want high quality, hand sculpted all the way, no computers in sight, then you want to click the link in the description to that Wasteman Knights of Nar Kickstarter, because that is all hand sculpted. Excruciating attention to detail. Attention to detail, but because it's by hand, you can't have necessarily the tiny little fiddly detail that you'd have to zoom in 1,000 times on a computer to create. Anything else here? Bazooka says, yes, easier to follow rules, less treasure hunting. Yes, that's my dream for 40k. Less treasure hunting would be perfect. Now, we're going to be wrapping this one up in a second, because I do have to get up early in the morning for that Kings of War tournament, which is going to be a lot of fun. And if anyone's got any last minute comments they want to drop in here that I can get to before we go off the air, and then I'll squeeze those in before we go. And I'm going to start sharing the wonderful logo for this week's show. There you go. Authentic image of Harambe the Valiant there. Of course, immortalized in knight form in the Kickstarter, linked in the description below. And of course, my head on a plague zombie for Deadzone, which I'm looking forward to very, very much. I was going to convert some Z's, the little monkeys, into zombies, which I thought would be really funny because they're so small, you would barely be able to shoot them when they're hiding behind things. But with these new zombies looking so cool and being almost available, I might not have actually got around to doing the Z zombies before these guys are out. So we shall see. Titan Edition says, do some more Lewd Bowl. Well, Blood Bowl isn't out yet. And when it does come out, I am not sure whether I would play it or not. I've got so many other game systems. It depends entirely on whether anyone around here wants to play it. I'm open to play the majority of games. Most things outside of War Machine, I will at least give a go. I've got various issues with War Machine and Hordes I'm not going to go into now, but most games I would give a try and would play if someone around here wanted to play it. Let's see. Sam Garcia, ZZs, yes. Or World War Zs, as an alternative name, or Stage Zs. There's many ways it can go. So, I think we're going to drop this one now, folks. Hopefully I'll see most of you either on Tuesday next week for the Andy and Rem show, or next Friday for this show next week. I don't know what the topic's going to be yet. We'll have to see if anything exciting drops over the following 6 or 7 days. And I may get another video up in the meantime. I've got an Age of Sigmar battle report to work on. I've got a Kings of War battle report, which is a little bit annoying me right now, because I captured a webcam video, high quality, of the entire game, which I was then going to slice down so you could see almost the entirety of a chess clock Kings of War game, just to get a good feel for that. But the format that the webcam seems to capture in isn't accepted by my video editing program, so I need to do some kind of shenanigans to convert it into a different kind of MP4 before I can actually edit it, so that's going to be annoying. But I couldn't have put that up by now anyway, because it was going to be revealing prematurely my Kings of War tournament list, which I was only revealing tonight for general consumption. Dino Titan Edition, if you want to try it, I'll fly over and give you an introductory game. Fly over to do an introductory game of Blood Bowl, that's some serious commitment there. I'm not sure many people would be willing to do that. Flying around the world to give people introductory games is something that maybe a service you should offer people for money. For only £1,000 or €1,000, I will fly to your home, whichever country you're in, and teach you how to play game X. I might look into that, actually. I wonder how many people out there would be interested in me flying to your home. It would have to be flying, even if you only live about 10 miles away. You would have to get me a private helicopter, I think. How many people would be interested in that service if I come to your house and teach you a game system? That's one for the permanent comments because I'm about to end the show, so I won't see them if you're typing it now. So don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to check out the Facebook group in the description. Don't forget to check out that Kickstarter tomorrow morning when it goes live. And I think the only thing left to be said is good night out there, whatever you are.